and this is Changing the Narrative. I'm your host, David Rives. We're changing the narrative every week on this podcast by looking at real truth, replacing the narrative, the atheistic narrative that has been pushed on us over the years with real truth, real facts, real science. That's what we have been doing for 17 years in ministry, and that's what we continue to do every day. Today, we have a little bit of a special program. In the past, we had a series of podcasts where we looked at sort of the history of how the Lord led us to this position. And we want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper. And for that, I've brought on my friend, Robert Dabbs, co-worker in the ministry. He's been tirelessly working on exhibits, design, the landscaping. I love that, Robert, because you kind of have a passion for botany and all of these types of plants and can identify flowers and trees that I couldn't begin to identify. So it's just been a pleasure working with you. But we're, again, swapping it up one more time, where you are almost going to be hosting this episode, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the history of the museum, right?
Right. Last episode, we talked about how you procured this building. Now we want to talk about some of the challenges after you got started. And if anybody's not been here, they may not realize how large this facility is. This is on 3 floors. It's about 103,000 square feet. Is that right?
It's 106, I think.
106,000, okay. It's pretty close to 2.5 acres under roof here. So this is a very large facility. And it wasn't exactly move-in ready, was it?
It was not. No, the Wonder Center and Science Museum has a past, and that past, in Dixon, Tennessee, it was originally built as a community arts center, basically. Had a little bit of a focus on science, some science classes and things like that, workshops. But then it was used as a university, like testing rooms, workshops. There were some nursing classes that were taught in the lower levels. There were beautiful rooms, absolutely beautiful architecture. But again, they were being used simply to have lectures. And it was a little bit of a waste, but not just a little bit of a waste. We're looking at around 20-something years of buildup of furniture that was moved in and then moved into storage and then moved somewhere else and then moved into storage of just all of these components, which left a cluttered mess. Not only that, but there was the tornado as well.
Mm-hmm. So that left considerable damage to the building and leakage and so on.
It did. There was a tornado about a year or so before we picked it up, and it traveled through this area. Didn't do any major damage to this exact area, but there was enough strong wind nearby that it ripped off multiple panels off of the planetarium, the big sphere that you can see from the road, the kind of the icon. It's on in fact, the planetarium, that massive charcoal colored sphere is on the logo of the Chamber of Commerce for the city. It is on murals throughout the entire city, in restaurants, in everywhere you look, you see that iconic sphere. Well, what had happened was several pieces of metal sheathing had blown off of that planetarium sphere, and the wind picked them up and started turning them head on heels straight up, so that as it hit the roof of the building, it began slicing the roof all over. Again, I didn't know a thing about this. This was before I picked it up, but obviously a panel had blown off and shattered 2 pieces of glass on the front of the building, had dented some of the panels on the highway side facing the building. It had caused considerable damage, yes.
Okay. So after you get in the building, you examine all the damage and you see the full scope of, was there ever that moment when you thought, what in the world have I got myself into? How are we going to get this up to top quality?
Yes, there were many moments like that. So much so that it was hard to sleep, because I saw so much potential and yet so much work at the same time. I would stay up all hours of the night making a list of everything that had to be done. And as that list is growing to 100, 200, 300, 400, 600 tasks, just to try to get it manageable. You know, every day we would knock out a few, but I would add way more than we were knocking out. It was like, oh my goodness, this is a challenge. There's a lot of work to be done. But at the same time, Robert, I saw so many coincidences, and I put that in air quotes for those who are listening right now. I saw so many miracles that were taking place, things that were falling in line that simply shouldn't have happened so smoothly, that I knew that the Lord had a purpose and that God had huge plans for this property.
So with all the square footage and all the cubic footage that entails, what'd you think when you started getting those first utility bills?
The utility bills were absolutely shocking. And when I first got I was like, no, there must have been a mistake. I've never experienced anything like that, because we're talking about electrical, we're talking about HVAC, the air conditioning and heating is tremendous. And then you've got the gas, you've got the water bills, you've got all of these things. And so it's a massive property to maintain. So I said, well, how can we be more efficient with this? Well, number one, let's go through the HVAC system. And the Lord provided a dear friend who lives close. He showed up one day and he said, if you need any help with HVAC, I'm here. I'll try to cut you deals. I know it's a big property to handle and you've bitten off a lot, right? And it was so true. And so I would spend, an hour every night going through the electrical part of the air conditioning of the HVAC system, personally tweaking the parameters to see if I could make it slightly more efficient, right? All of a sudden, those bills are halving, okay? Something's working. Over the next few months, probably 9 months, we were able to convert almost everything to LED. And that LED conversion, and now pretty much everything in this entire building is LED. And that conversion, again, all of a sudden we're seeing those electrical bills halved, right? Mm-hmm. There were so many different components, and they took weeks upon weeks with each component. But with all that hard work, we were seeing things turning into something manageable, where now the building is actually being maintained, right? It's not just left to its own devices. It is actually being maintained and it's being thought out. But I had to be very proactive in every one of those situations personally, and it took almost a year. It really did take almost a year to get a hold on all of these components. And that was time that it took away from me being able to develop the actual museum portion, right?
Right.
So thankfully, we've got a very dedicated, hardworking team, and they were able to take pieces of this off of my plate, and I was able to start plotting the way that the exhibits were going to look, and it eventually came together. But we're talking about June of 2022 was when I got the keys to the building, mm-hmm. and walked in. And even still, insurance work was going on to repair that tornado damage that had happened. The previous owners had insurance work going. So when I got the keys to the building, I walked in. There's scaffolding everywhere. There are scissor lifts beeping up and down the halls. One wing was completely covered with drop cloth, with like painting drop cloth. And it was so covered with paint that, you basically had to part the veil just to look down one wing of the entire building. Let's just put it this way. It should have been overwhelming. And at times, it seemed like it might get that way. But when you know that God has a plan, and that you're not the one in control, and that there is a vision so much greater. Like, yes, I have this vision, but I'm standing here looking up at the mountain, and he's looking down at the final picture. Mm-hmm. Well, I can't get overwhelmed because it's all going to work out in the end.
Right. Well, you started building out those exhibits in June outside of placement of several large items. Yeah. And yet you opened officially to the public on October 12th. That's just a few months later. It wasn't just thrown together. It was carefully thought out and carefully put together so that it doesn't look like it was built out in 3 or 4 months. And people can't believe that we've only been open since October 12th. They think we've been here for years.
I know. No, it's very polished, right? For only being open at this, depends on when everybody's listening to this or watching this, but as of taping, we've been open for approximately 7 months. And we put so much thought into each exhibit because I didn't want it to be a hodgepodge. I've been through museums where they try to couple this with that, and they kind of just throw up posters on the wall and that's it. I wanted people to be able to walk through, and each room they walked into, it takes you through a journey of that particular field of science, right? So there is an entire hall dedicated to paleontology, which encompasses multiple things, dinosaurs and fossils, things like that, right? But it's still very narrow. There is a hall dedicated to zoology, and there are live animals in there, and there's an insect collection in there, an entomology collection. There is exotic sea life. There are feathers, and we tell the story of match pairs, the way feathers grow. So each field of science is really its own exhibit hall, and what we wanted was something that anyone could walk through, and they're walking through a science museum and they're being blown away with the facts, but at the same time they're getting these nuggets of truth, right? They're getting these references to how the design of this particular creature implies that there is a designer, right? And so yes, it's extremely well thought out, but it's come together so quickly.
So what kind of age range of a visitor would find this place to be of interest?
Robert, I didn't know initially exactly how people were going to feel about this, right? So when we opened, all of a sudden we started having this huge age range where adults loved the material that they were, the exhibits they were seeing, the material that they could read. The layman was like, I can understand everything. We had PhD scientists walk in just curious, what is this about? Is this some sort of a Bible thumping museum? And they walk in and they're impressed with the scientific facts, right? Because we do have that side of things as well. Very, very detailed exhibits in some cases. And then the teens would come in, and the teens would go to the Tesla show. They would go into some of the other exhibit halls. They would interact with some of the live animals and all, and they were like, "Wow, we really, really enjoyed this," right? And then your younger children were fascinated with the entire thing, the hands-on activities, digging up the dinosaurs in the sand pit, racing the cars downhill, turning the gears, doing the experimenting with the ramps and all of these things. And so they were crying as their parents tried to drag them away at the end of the day, right? After a full day there. And what I've been so that I could have almost anticipated, but we have had 2- and 3-year-olds come in, and the parents are like, we were expecting them to last 15-20 minutes. We've been here for 2-3 hours, and they are just having a ball. They haven't gotten bored one time. So what I've figured out, Robert, is that you can't actually put an age range on this museum. Everyone so far has loved it, regardless of age.
Well, we found that people tend to stay for quite some time, usually half a day or more. So.
Usually half a day, and I would say a good 25% stay the entire day. They show up as soon as it opens, and then they're closing us out at the end of the day. And then you've got those 15% diehards who are like, we simply didn't have enough time all day long to see it all. We need to come back for at least one more full day just to be able to absorb the information, because we walked through everything, but that's not the same as learning from it, right? So yeah, we're finding that people are making an experience out of this. Is a destination. It's not something that you do just if you're local. This is a destination that you travel across the country to come see. And again, it's something that I could have expected, but I couldn't have known until I saw it for myself.
Well, there's other creation ministries out there, other creation museums. What's your relationship with them? Are you a competitor or friendly allies? How does this work? Nearly
every creation ministry we're not only friendly with, but I have dear friends. Some of the scientists on their in their organizations are dear friends that I've had on our television programs that have written the foreword to my books, who we go out to dinner together. So the organizations themselves, most of them, we're not just friendly, not just speaking terms, but like actively trying to promote what they're doing. And then the other creation museums that are out there, of course, it's not a competition. This is nothing like any of the other experiences that are out there, right? Can't even be compared. It's like trying, apples and oranges. Everybody has their own specialty. And if you try to compare this to any other museum that's out there, or even like, let's take the Ark Encounter, for example. It's nothing like the Ark Encounter. Are we on a similar vein? Absolutely. But there's no way to compare it. The Creation Museum is this incredible experience that takes you through history. It has some science. It has different components to it. But I mean, there's a night and day difference other than the message that we're conveying. The Discovery Center in Dallas, Texas, ICR, they're dear friends. They actually have exhibits from their museum in this museum, so that we can then, when people see their exhibits, massive exhibits in this museum, we direct them. We're like, if you loved this, then next time you're in Dallas, you need to go to the Discovery Center, right? People from all over. In Branson, there is a creation museum that has a lot of different components to it, but they actually have pieces of mammoth ivory that they have donated to the museum here, so that we can kind of promote what they're doing and some of their things. And the story goes on. Animal sanctuaries in East Tennessee, friends of mine who are chemists who have donated different displays. It's just like all of these ministries have a great portion. They've got great information. And what I'm trying to do is provide a platform to exponentially grow what they're doing as well as everything that we're doing. And ultimately, it's about the gospel.
Right.
Because you're going to walk through here, and if you're a secularist, you're probably going to enjoy the science. We get people quite often who walk through here who don't believe anything like what we believe, probably not even Christians, and you can tell they're a little bit skeptical. They're like, man, we loved the museum. We did see a lot of references, to God throughout here, and that's kind of intriguing. We've never really thought about that. Well, that's the point.
All right.
We want you to think about it. We're not trying to push it on anyone, but we want you to at least consider this possibility, because if you're open to objective facts and information, if you're not in some little box, if you have an open mind, you will see that there is far more evidence, and that evidence is displayed in this museum, for a designed universe as opposed to a chance or natural universe. And then the next question, Robert, is to say, well, who is the designer? And that's where we could talk about intelligent design all day long, because I believe in intelligent design. an intelligence designed this universe. I don't want to just stop there. I want to tell you who that intelligence is. And it's ultimately Jesus Christ. It's our Savior. It's our Redeemer. So we're not ashamed of the gospel, but we present all of the information in such a way that it gets the person on the fence to take a second look at some of these things.
Okay.
And it's really exciting to see the light bulb moments for the people who walk through.
Right. Well, let's say somebody has been to some other creation museums. What sets you apart? What's different about this place versus the others?
Yeah. Again, it's not an easy comparison because there's not a lot to compare. Other museums that I've been to, and I've been to most of, like I said, I have friends, dear friends in the leadership of most of these other creation museums or ministries or whatever they may be. We don't consider ourselves a creation museum, right? We are a science museum that looks at the origin of science and the designer of the world. So we're looking at God's creation, but we're looking at it with through the perspective of let's explore scientific fields and see where all these fields are converging together. And there's one spot where they're converging together. That's God. If you go to the other creation museums, other different sites and attractions, you're going to see a lot of history, and we definitely have history components. But again, ours is science heavy, but it's a layman type of science, right? We'll have some of the scientific facts that are for the PhDs, and then we're going to break down things super simply. And then we're going to have a display where an adult or a teen can look at the display and learn from the display. And then we're going to have a hands-on display where the younger children can, and adults as well, can touch something, can experience that which we're trying to teach, right? In an experiential way so that it becomes real to them. That's the way I learn is, I find that education can sometimes be very boring. But if you make it so real where there's something to touch, something to feel, an auditory experience, something that's happening there, you're seeing things that you've never seen before. Then you're reading things and you're absorbing that. And you're surrounding yourself in this environment, which is exciting, which is not just exciting, but palatable, educational, inspirational. Then all of a sudden, the information that you're seeing as you walk through the museum, the Wonder Center, you actually absorb it. You don't just walk away saying, that was a big place. No, you're like, my goodness, I feel like I'm in awe of the amazing design throughout every scientific field. And how could that have happened by chance?
So you're saying Christianity and science are not at odds?
Not at all. That's the thing. I have talked to so many people when I go out and I speak in churches and conferences and all of that, and they're like, yeah, science and religion don't mix. Dr. Werner von Braun said a lot of people look at science and Christianity or science and religion as antagonists. He said they're sisters, really, because when you think about it, our Christian beliefs are, and we can read the Bible and we can become more in tune with, understand who our Creator is better, right? But then we can use scientific methods like archaeology, paleontology, geology, astronomy, how the heavens declare the glory of God, all of these other sciences to better understand His creation. So you can't have creation without a creator. You can't have design without a designer. So science and our Christian beliefs go hand in hand together. They fit perfectly like a glove. It's just everyone's afraid to tell us that. It's like they're ashamed. Why would you be ashamed to say that there has to be a supernatural origin of life, right? There's no way to explain how life originated through natural functions. Therefore, it must be supernatural. We've got to explain everything naturally. Why? You can't explain everything naturally, so why are you trying to explain everything naturally? Why don't you embrace that the origin of life must have been supernatural. And then ask yourself, who is that supernatural force that's outside of the universe, outside of space, time, and matter, able to manipulate the entirety of the universe, and yet he's so loving that he will come to earth to save us from our sins so that we could be a part of his family for eternity.
Well, we just have a moment or two left here, and it's almost unfair to ask you this question. But how would you summarize what David Rives Ministries is all about?
We are revealing God's fingerprints of design. We are inspiring generations and educating them that they are not accidents. They are not star stuff. They are not the result of random chance 14 billion years of stellar evolution that just happened and coalesced into a human being. That we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that we are actually made in the image of God. And so often we tune that out because we say science says. No, scientists have been lying to us for years. And it's time to get back to what science says, the raw data, the facts that are supporting the idea that we are wonderfully made, and ultimately we have purpose through Christ.
Amen.
Well, I really appreciate you facilitating this conversation, Robert, and for everything that you do for the ministry, for the museum, and I always enjoy sharing my passion. It's a little bit unusual again in a situation like this where I'm normally the ones asking the questions, but at the same time, I just see the impact that it's having on so many people. Buses pulling in from Southern California, ladies' retreat buses pulling in from North Dakota, people, school groups, church groups, everyone coming in from all over the world. And they're learning the truth of God's creation. Let's continue the discussion some more sometime, all right?
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on Changing the Narrative. I'm David Rives, and until next time, I want you to keep looking up, because truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Find us on all social platforms to stay informed. Watch Genesis Science Network 24/7 for free on Roku, Fire TV, and on our website. Visit the world's largest origins-based store, creationsuperstore.com. Plan your trip to the Wonders Center and Science Museum just outside of Nashville, Tennessee.